My name is Evelyn Moore, and that night I danced under the full moon as if my life depended on it. Don't ask me why. My feet moved before my brain could understand what was happening. An ancient, silent, relentless force took hold of me. It was as if every bone in my body remembered something my mind had forgotten. And the worst part? I wasn't alone. The entire town was there, at the annual Harvest Moon Festival Fair, watching, including my father, Matthew, who looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost, including my best friend, Zoe, who dropped her phone on the ground when she realized I was crying as I spun in the middle of the square. But what no one saw was what happened afterward, when I fainted and woke up hours later on my grandmother. Eleanor's porch, my clothes covered in dirt and my knees scraped as if I'd crawled through the woods. She didn't say much, just held my face with those thin, cold hands and said, her eyes brimming with tears, "You heard it, didn't you? They called you." At the time, I thought it was delirium, but when I saw the crescent moon-shaped mark appearing on my skin just below my collarbone, I knew something had been unleashed, something neither of us was ready to face. The next day, the sun felt colder. It wasn't the weather. It was me. I'd woken up with the sensation that something inside me had shifted, like a bone out of place, invisible to the touch but throbbing within. The messages on my phone started early. People who never spoke to me asking if I was okay, sending links to videos. I didn't even need to open them to know what they were. Images of me dancing in the square like a woman possessed had already become the talk of the town. The annual Harvest Moon Festival had never gotten so much attention. Zoe showed up at my door before 10, no makeup, wearing her old high school hoodie. She didn't say good morning. She just walked in, sat on the couch, and stared at me, as if I were an equation she needed to solve. "Do you remember everything?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. I closed my eyes. I remembered, not just the dance, but what I felt before I passed out, a presence, a consciousness blending with mine, as if a second heart had started beating inside me. I saw shadows writhing beneath my feet, saw the faces of the crowd dissolve into blurs of light and darkness. And I heard something whispering in the wind, in a language that burned my ears. I shook my head, unable to explain. Zoe hugged me without a word. It was the first time she hugged me with fear, not for me, but of me. Later, I went to Grandma Eleanor's house. Since Grandpa died, she rarely left her rocking chair, but her eyes remained sharp, too alive for a 92-year-old woman. She was waiting for me, as if she knew I'd come. In her lap, a sealed envelope with red wax. She sat up straight as I approached. "You heard it, didn't you?" she asked, her voice steady, as if my answer didn't matter. She handed me the envelope with trembling hands. The paper was old, smelling of ancient wood and forgotten time. Inside was a letter written in dark, nearly faded ink, signed by someone named Amara Moore, dated 1887. My blood ran cold as I read. It spoke of a lineage marked by a sacred dance, a pact made with something that couldn't be named, and a clear warning. If the dance ever happens outside the ceremony, the cycle will be broken, and whoever performs it, unprepared, will be the key to the awakening. When I looked up, Eleanor silently pointed to the old oval mirror leaning against the corner of the room. "Look," but with an open heart. I approached, hesitant, expecting to see my reflection. But it wasn't me. It was a woman with long, dark hair, skin pale as porcelain, dressed in ancient clothing, and her eyes exactly like mine. She was dancing. She didn't smile, and even trapped in that glass, I could feel her pain. And it was then in that moment that the voice whispered inside me for the first time. It wasn't my voice. It was older, firmer, and it said just 3 words. You are the last. Since that morning, my reality became a cracked mirror. Everything still looked the same, but every detail carried a subtle distortion, as if the world around me were trying to tell me something through an invisible layer. The visions started invading my days. It wasn't just at night anymore. I could be brushing my teeth and suddenly see a hand, pale, with long, dirty nails, touch my shoulder in the mirror's reflection. I'd turn, and nothing was there, but the weight of the touch still burned on my skin. Sometimes I'd hear my name whispered in places where no one knew me. At school, at the grocery store, even inside the car with the windows closed. Zoe noticed I was different. She tried to cheer me up with jokes, but her eyes searched mine with a kind of fear. She couldn't hide. I didn't blame her. I was scared too. Not of what I saw, but of what I felt inside me. As if something were growing there, a parallel consciousness, old, patient. And the worst part, it knew me better than I knew myself. I started spending more time with Eleanor. It was as if she were the only anchor possible in this strange sea I'd plunged into. She spoke sparingly, but each sentence tied another piece of the puzzle together. One day she took me to the basement, a place I'd avoided since childhood. There, among moldy boxes and furniture covered in cloths, was a dark wooden chest, a crescent moon symbol etched in iron. Inside was a diary. Worn leather, rough pages, the smell of things that didn't belong to the present. It was Amara Moore's diary. I started reading it that same night. The first pages spoke of dreams, then voices, and then the ritual. Not a religious or folkloric ritual. Something older, more primal. A surrender of the body to the earth, to blood, to what slept beneath the feet of men. She wrote of visions that became reality, of marked children, of a dance that sealed the boundary between the visible and the invisible, and of a promise that one day the last of the lineage would dance alone and the doors would be opened. I couldn't sleep. I closed my eyes and saw a forest I'd never visited, yet recognized as if it had been created inside me. A twisted tree, a circle of stones, the sound of my own name, shouted by mouths that no longer existed. I woke up with blood dripping from my nose. When I went to look in the mirror, I saw Amara's reflection again. But this time, she smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It was ancient, as if she already knew what would come next. And at that same moment, I received a message from an unknown number. The mark has appeared. I'm on my way. Don't talk to anyone. The unknown number didn't send anything else after that first message, but something in me knew he was already close. I felt it. It was like a constant shiver, a subtle vibration under my skin, as if my bones were tuned to a frequency that didn't belong to this time. I spent the morning trying to act normal, but every object I touched seemed to reject me. My phone froze whenever I tried to call someone. The shower water ran cold no matter how much I turned the knob. And my dreams, they no longer waited for night. They came in flashes when I blinked too long. Glimpses of a blood-soaked field bathed in light, voices calling me with urgency and anger. The mark below my collarbone began to darken, as if something pulsed within it. In the mirror, for a second, I saw the skin move as if it were alive. I thought I was going insane. Then he arrived. I saw him for the first time as I left Eleanor's house at dusk. Tall, thin, dressed in clothes too simple for the cold of that day. But what paralyzed me were his eyes, an almost amber green, fixed on me as if they'd known me since before I was born. He didn't smile. He just walked toward me, unhurried, and stopped less than 2 steps from my body. You danced without knowing what you carried, he said, his voice seeming to seep through my pores. Now they're waking up. I didn't ask who they were. I didn't need to. The truth didn't come in words. It came in memories that weren't mine, flooding my mind as if a dam had burst. Screaming children, marked women, extinguished bonfires, and the dance, always the dance, performed in circles under moons that no longer existed. I stumbled back. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. He slowly raised his hand and pointed at my chest. The mark answered, "You are the link, and the cycle has already begun." At that moment, I heard my name echo from the opposite direction. Zoe's voice, breathless, frightened. She ran to me, grabbed my shoulders, and tried to pull me away. "Who's that guy? Evelyn, let's go now!" But when she looked to where he'd been, she saw only emptiness. He was gone. I couldn't explain. I could only show her the mark. It was raw, as if it had been burned from the inside. Zoe took a step back. Her eyes gleamed with fear. "You need help," she said. But I knew in that moment she could no longer follow me, not because she didn't want to, but because something in me no longer belonged to this world. That night, I returned home alone. I lay in bed with Amara's diary on my lap, and one word she'd written trembled under my gaze, as if freshly scratched, awakened. I closed the book. Outside, the moon was rising, and I knew, without a shred of doubt, that my life, as I'd known it, was over. In the nights that followed, sleep became an exercise in endurance. I'd close my eyes, but it was like diving into a world that waited for me with open doors, as if everything inside me were trying to spill out. I dreamed of places I'd never been, felt pains that weren't mine, and woke with ancient words clinging to my tongue, as if I'd spent the night reciting forgotten incantations. The mark on my chest grew more alive each day. It wasn't just a scar. It was like an open wound pulsing to the rhythm of something greater than me. An ancestral drum beating beneath my skin, reminding me I belonged to something I didn't understand, but that was already shaping everything around me. Eleanor began to talk more, never directly. Her words came in fragments, as if she were stitching a story together, afraid I'd pull the wrong thread and tear it all apart. She spoke of Amara as if she were still alive, said some names never truly die, and that there was too much blood in the roots of our family. "You feel the voices, don't you?" she asked, as she brewed tea with herbs I didn't recognize. I nodded silently. It no longer shocked me to hear murmurs when I was alone, to feel presences watching me as I crossed the school hallway, or to see shadows slithering at the edges of my vision. The world was showing me its cracks, and for some reason, I was the only one who could see through them. On the third day after meeting the stranger, he appeared again, this time in the municipal library. I saw him between the shelves, standing, watching. When I approached, he called me by my full name, Evelyn Amara Moore, and something inside me shuddered. I asked who he was. He answered only, "Someone who carries the other side of the story." He said the mark was a key, but also a sentence, that I'd awakened a dormant chain, and now forgotten things would start seeking me out. "You'll see symbols repeating, sounds, patterns, names. They don't come by chance." Then he handed me an envelope. Inside was a black and white photograph, old, of a woman who looked exactly like me. On the back, a date, 1901, and 2 words, "The First Dance." I left there with trembling hands. The world, already strange, was now folding in on itself. I found symbols I'd never seen before scribbled on school lockers. I saw a dead bird fall from the sky at my feet, its eyes black as oil. And when I returned home that afternoon, the mark had changed again, grown, stretched across my collarbone like a root seeking space. I looked in the mirror. The reflection was still mine. But The eyes, there was something more in them, as if Amara was still there, as if I were no longer alone, not even inside. The days began to blur into one another, as if time had lost its straight line and started bending around me. I'd wake up not knowing what day it was, my hair tangled as if I'd fought something, in my sleep. The mark, now visible even under high-necked shirts, seemed to burn when someone stared at it too long, and people noticed. My classmates avoided eye contact. Teachers treated me as if I were fragile or dangerous, and Zoe didn't know how to act anymore. The friendship that had once been my refuge became a space filled with silences, brief glances, and interrupted sentences. She still loved. Me, I knew, but there was fear in her eyes, a fear she couldn't disguise. The visions now came even with my eyes open. I could be in class, copying something into my notebook, and the pen would slip from my hand as the wall in front of me melted for a moment, revealing a misty forest with figures in the distance watching me, still as statues. When I blinked, everything returned to normal, but the feeling lingered, as if that place were growing closer each day. I started writing, not by choice, but because the words just came. Manuscripts on loose sheets, strange symbols in the corners of my notebooks, sentences in a language I couldn't pronounce, but that seemed to sing in my chest. Eleanor read it all in silence. Sometimes she cried without saying a word. Other times she smiled as if she'd been waiting for this for a long time. Then one day, she handed me a small wooden box, carved with the same crescent moon as my mark. Inside was a silver locket, a strand of dark hair, and a letter. The handwriting matched Amara's diary. In it she described her last dance. Not the first, the last. An incomplete ritual, interrupted by someone who was supposed to protect her. She spoke of betrayal, of a force that had inhabited this world since before time was counted, of a name that shouldn't be spoken, and of a child who would survive the final rupture, a child who would inherit everything, the visions, the mark, the burden. My name was written at the end of the letter. Evelyn. The ink faded but unmistakable, and with the letter there was a map. Not of streets, but of symbols, lunar positions, ancient cycles, dates hastily scratched out, and at the center, the drawing of a twisted tree with roots too deep, as if they plunged beyond the earth. That night, I had the clearest dream yet. I walked to the tree, and beneath it, a woman knelt, singing softly. When she turned, it was me. But her eyes were empty, and when she smiled, my ears bled. I woke with my mouth full of dirt, literally, dark soil between my teeth, in the corners of my mouth, as if I'd crawled out of a place that didn't belong to the living. That's when I understood. I wasn't just seeing the past. I was being dragged into it. That week, I completely lost my grip on reality. The voices no longer whispered. They screamed, overlapping my thoughts, demanding attention like starving children. My body swung between fevers and chills, as if waging an invisible battle within. Eleanor said it was the process, that the veil was thinning, and with it, the boundaries between what is and what was. The town began to react. Animals disappeared. Plants withered faster. Birds flew in circles for hours before dropping from the sky, as if they'd forgotten how to live. People felt it, even if they didn't understand. They looked at me with more fear than curiosity now, as if they knew something was growing beneath my skin, even if they couldn't see it. The stranger, the one who'd given me the photograph, started appearing more often, never for long, always on the edges, always watching. One night, amid whispers and dizziness, he took me to a place I'd never seen but recognized instantly. The tree, the same one from the map. It was there as in the dream, alive, pulsing, almost breathing. Its roots seemed to move beneath the soil, and the air around it felt heavy, as if filled with voices that didn't need mouths to speak. Touch the trunk, and the entire world cracked within. I saw the first dance, the real one. I saw Amara surrounded by hooded figures. I saw the rupture, and I saw the blood, so much blood, flowing between the roots, both offering and punishment. I returned home unable to speak a word. The next morning, my father, who'd spent years distancing himself from everything but his own pain, called me to talk. His eyes were tired, but there was a new sadness in them. The sadness of someone who knows and hides it. He confessed he'd known. That my mother had the mark too. That she danced, but she never came back whole. He said she disappeared for 3 days before she died, and when she returned, she looked at him as if she didn't recognize him. He said Eleanor tried to stop it from happening again back then, but it was too late. The lineage demands its price, he said, his voice breaking. But the worst is when the debt isn't fully paid. That's when I realized. The mark wasn't an inevitable fate. It was an inherited debt, and I was the final payment. That night, I had another vision. This time, it wasn't a dream. I was awake, and in the window's reflection I saw the same figure as always, the woman with my eyes. But now she spoke. Her lips moved, and though I didn't hear the sound, I understood perfectly. It's coming. Choose. And for the first time, I felt what Amara must have felt before her last dance. Not fear, nor courage, but the exact awareness that time had run out. That early morning there was no dream. There was a call, a pull beneath my skin, a faceless presence dragging me from within. I left the house without knowing how I'd put on my coat or why my hands gripped Amara's diary so tightly. It wasn't cold, but my body shook. The town seemed frozen in time. No sound, no light, no witnesses. It was as if the entire world had held its breath, waiting for my next step. And I went, guided by the pulsing mark burning below my collarbone, alive like a second heart. Every step led me back to the same place, the tree. That tree from my dreams, my delusions, the ancient drawings in the diary. It was there, still but hungry. Its roots rose from the ground like fingers about to grasp. He was waiting for me, the man with amber eyes standing in the tree's shadow, as if he were part of it, as if he'd always been part of all this. The moment has come, he said, without smiling. And then the others came. I don't know where they came from, only that they were there. Female figures, young, old, with marks like mine scattered across their bodies. Some covered them with bandages, others left them exposed. Their eyes, all so familiar, pierced me with expectation, but also with pain. It was as if they'd all failed, and I was the last chance at redemption. My hands were sweating, my chest burned, and when I took my first step forward, something shifted in the air, as if the ground recognized my blood. The dance began on its own. My body moved without command, but there was no fear this time. There was something greater, a deep understanding that all of this was mine. I was the heir to the silence, the rupture, the unfulfilled promise. The spins intensified, and I felt the world around me shrink. I saw Amara among the trees, not young, not old, just her, whole. Her eyes found mine, and this time she cried, not from pain, but from surrender, from acceptance. The ground trembled beneath my feet. The tree cracked as if opening its mouth for the first time in centuries. And then I stopped. Eyes closed, feet rooted in the earth, heart calm, and within me, silence. The voices ceased. The pressure ceased. The mark faded like a flame that had fulfilled its purpose. When I opened my eyes, the man was gone. The women vanished like mist dissipating at dawn. And the tree breathed calmly, as if returning to sleep after centuries on guard. I returned home at sunrise. Eleanor was waiting, seated, hands clasped in her lap. When she saw me, she smiled as if witnessing a miracle. "You came back whole," she said. And that was all. We sat in silence. For the first time, a silence without fear. In my bedroom mirror, I looked for the mark. It was no longer there. But I knew it hadn't disappeared. It had become part of me, woven into who I am now, not as a curse, but as a root. And for the first time, looking at my reflection, I saw only this: Evelyn. Nothing more. Nothing less. Whole. Mine. Some stories don't end with a period. They linger, silent, within us. Since that night, I haven't danced again, at least not like before. Now every step I take is deliberate. Every gesture carries weight and memory. The mark is gone, but there are days when I wake with warm skin, as if something still calls my name from afar. Eleanor says cycles never vanish, they just change shape, and I believe her. Because sometimes, in the window's reflection, when the full moon glows outside, I see someone standing behind me. She has my eyes, and she smiles.